The store was a symbol of wealth. Its shiny glass windows displayed expensive designer clothes, attracting only the wealthiest of customers. Inside, elegant chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the floors were polished to perfection. Luxury, perfume filled the air, and the racks were lined with expensive shoes, bags, and suits. The atmosphere was rich with exclusivity. Everyone who entered was either a celebrity, a business mogul, or someone who could afford the high-end fashion they offered. But today something was different. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and in walked Marcus Carter. He didn't look like the typical customer you would expect to see in such a store. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit or flashy accessories. In fact, Marcus wore a simple black hoodie, old jeans, and sneakers that were more practical than stylish. His demeanor was calm and quiet, far from the bold, confident aura most CEOs would display. The staff barely noticed him as he stepped through the doors. A few glanced in his direction but quickly turned their attention back to their duties. They didn't know it, but the man they just ignored was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world. Marcus Carter had built his empire from the ground up, but today he wasn't here for attention. He was here for something different. He looked around the store, taking in the expensive displays and the high-end fashion. To anyone else, this would be the perfect place to shop for something exclusive, something that matched their status. But for Marcus, today wasn't about making a statement. It was about blending in, seeing if he could experience what regular people went through when they stepped into a place like this. As he walked down the aisles, past the glittering watches and the most expensive shoes, he couldn't help but observe the way the other customers were treated. He noticed how the staff immediately rushed over to greet them, showering them with compliments, offering drinks, and even holding items up to their body to see how they looked. It was all about making the customers feel special, but only the ones who fit in. None of that attention was directed toward Marcus. He wasn't wearing the right clothes. His appearance didn't match what the store staff expected from someone in this space. They weren't rude, but they simply didn't care to treat him as someone worthy of special service. Marcus, however, didn't care. He wasn't there for the luxury experience. He wasn't there to shop in the way the store had designed its services. He was there to see how people treated him when they thought he was just another face in the crowd. The more he walked through the store, the more he realized just how different the world of high-end shopping was from what he had experienced in his business dealings. At the far end of the store, a group of staff members were chatting amongst themselves, clearly unaware of Marcus's presence. They were busy gossiping, laughing about their most recent sales and the customers who had just left. One of the staff members, a woman named Cindy, turned around and caught sight of Marcus, standing near a display of designer jackets. Her eyes quickly scanned his attire, and she raised an eyebrow. She looked over to another colleague who was folding a shirt and said something under her breath. They both exchanged looks, their faces reflecting a mixture of judgment and indifference. Cindy approached Marcus slowly, a forced smile on her. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone overly polite yet not overly enthusiastic. "Can I help you find something?" Marcus turned toward her, his calm demeanor never changing. He smiled faintly, though there was something about his expression that made Cindy pause for a second. "I'm just looking around," he replied simply. Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Sure, we have some new arrivals in the back if you'd like to take a look." Marcus shook his head. He wasn't interested in shopping for a new jacket or a fancy suit. He didn't need those things. "I'm okay, just browsing for now," he replied. Without saying another word, Cindy turned and walked away, but not without a final glance at Marcus. She clearly wasn't impressed by him. To her, he was just another regular person, someone who didn't belong in a store like this. Marcus stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of her judgment. It wasn't the first time he had felt dismissed in his life. People often underestimated him because of his appearance, because of how he chose to carry himself. He didn't walk around flaunting his wealth or status. He didn't need to. But today, he was experiencing the reality of what it felt like to be treated like someone unimportant, someone who wasn't worth a second glance. He let the feeling sink in, knowing that soon enough, he would have his chance to make the store and its staff see him in a completely different light. As Marcus continued to walk through the aisles, he caught sight of a large display of designer shoes. He paused for a moment, considering whether or not to take a closer look. But instead of continuing with the experience as the other customers did, he felt the urge to wait. He needed to see what would happen next, how the staff would react to him, and how they would treat someone who didn't fit their ideal of a luxury customer. Marcus had been in the store for nearly 20 minutes. The staff had continued their busy routines, barely acknowledging his presence. But he wasn't in a rush. He wasn't interested in the items for sale or the luxury service that was supposedly offered. He was here for something else. To test how the store treated people, how they judged him based on his appearance. He could feel the cold stares, the whispers behind his back. To the staff, he was just another person, someone who didn't belong in their world of high-end fashion. As Marcus strolled past the elegant displays of watches and designer shoes, he saw Cindy, the staff member who had spoken to him earlier. She was chatting with another worker, her eyes flicking over to him briefly before returning to her conversation. It wasn't a look of interest, just a glance that clearly dismissed him. But Marcus didn't mind. It wasn't anger he felt, but rather a quiet determination. He wanted to see what would happen when they realized their mistake. He wanted to see how long it would take them to understand who he really was. Suddenly, Cindy turned and walked toward him, a clipboard in her hand. This time her smile wasn't as warm. It was more forced, like she had a job to do and was now focused on moving him along. "Sir," she said, standing a little too close, "I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to change into a proper uniform before continuing your shopping." She held out a small bundle of clothes, an old janitor's uniform, complete with faded colors and a patch on the chest. Marcus blinked, taken aback by the unexpected request. "What?" he asked, trying to understand if he'd heard her correctly. "We've noticed that you don't quite fit with the typical look of our store," Cindy said, a little too matter-of-factly. "It's store policy that all non-customers, workers must change into the uniform. You can change in the back." She gestured toward the back of the store, pointing to the narrow hallway that led to the changing rooms. Marcus felt a sharp pang of discomfort. This wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. This was a clear attempt to push him aside, to make him feel small and invisible. Cindy's tone wasn't friendly anymore. It was a command, as though he had no choice but to comply. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath as if weighing his options. Should he walk away? Should he make a scene? But Marcus didn't like to make scenes. He had built his success with patience, with quiet strength. He wasn't about to let this moment go to waste, though. He wasn't going to let them get away with this. Without saying a word, Marcus took the uniform from her and walked toward the back of the store. The staff watched him silently, unsure of what was happening. They hadn't expected him to just take the uniform and leave. But as he turned the corner into the changing rooms, he could hear a soft laugh from one of the staff members. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Marcus pause. They were laughing at him. They were laughing at the man they thought was a janitor. The thought lingered in his mind as he entered the changing room. He wasn't angry, but a deep, unsettling feeling filled his chest. Was this how people were treated in their world? The world of luxury and status. He changed into the uniform quickly, the cheap fabric feeling foreign against his skin. The faded blue color contrasted sharply with the world around him, bright, polished, and perfect. When he stepped out of the changing room, he could feel the eyes of the staff on him. No one made a move to greet him or offer him assistance. Instead, they kept their distance, their gaze lingering on the janitor's uniform he now wore. It was like they had finally placed him in the category they thought he belonged in, a worker, nothing more. But Marcus wasn't a worker. He wasn't just a janitor. He was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company, and today he was about to show them exactly who he was. With steady steps, he walked through the aisles of the store, his shoes making no sound on the polished floor. He passed the customers who had been admiring the latest fashion, but none of them seemed to notice him. He was just another invisible figure in the background, and that was exactly what he wanted. He wanted them to see him for who they thought he was. He wanted to experience how people treated him when they believed he didn't matter. As he made his way toward the front of the store, the manager, a tall man in a crisp suit, finally noticed him. He gave Marcus a quick once-over, his face showing no sign of recognition. "Can I help you with anything?" the manager asked, his tone polite but not particularly warm. Marcus nodded slowly, his face calm. "Actually, yes. I'm here to speak. To you. I'm Marcus Carter, CEO of Carter Tech, and I'd like to have a word about how your staff treated me today." The manager blinked, clearly taken aback. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Marcus's words hung in the air, a powerful statement that silenced the entire room. They hadn't recognized him. They hadn't seen the wealth, the success, or the power behind the man in the janitor's uniform. And now Marcus was going to make sure they understood the mistake they'd made. The manager stood frozen, staring at Marcus. The other staff members, who had been busy talking amongst themselves, fell silent. All eyes were on him now, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus remained calm, his expression unreadable. He had been treated like just another invisible figure in their world of luxury, but now it was time for them to realize the truth. "I'm Marcus Carter," he repeated, his voice steady but carrying the weight of authority. "CEO of Carter Tech, and I'd like to know why your staff thought it was appropriate to treat me the way they did." The manager's face turned pale. For a moment he stood there, unable to speak. His mind raced, trying to process the situation. The man in the janitor's uniform wasn't just any worker. He was the head of one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. A few of the staff members exchanged nervous glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Cindy, who had handed him the janitor's uniform, was the first to speak, though her voice trembled slightly. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know. I'm so sorry," she stammered, looking like she wished the floor would swallow her whole. "I thought you were just another person who didn't belong here." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that how you treat all your customers? Is that the policy? To judge them by their appearance?" Cindy's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "No, of course not. We never meant to offend you. We just assumed." "Assumed what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "That I couldn't afford your overpriced clothes? That I didn't belong in your fancy store? You judged me the moment I walked in." The manager finally gathered his composure. He stepped forward, his voice now apologetic. "Mr. Carter, I deeply apologize for the way my staff treated you. We pride ourselves on offering the best service to every customer, no matter who they are. This will be dealt with immediately. Please, let me make it up to you. Let me get you whatever you need." Marcus didn't flinch. He wasn't interested in their offers. He wasn't here for an apology or to be treated like some VIP. He wanted them to understand the impact of their actions. "I don't need anything from you," Marcus said coldly. "I came in here to experience what it feels like to be treated. Like someone invisible, someone less important. And that's exactly what you did. You treated me like I wasn't worthy of your attention. And for what? Because I didn't dress the part? Because I didn't fit your idea of who should be here?" The manager and the staff stood silently, their faces filled with regret and guilt. They had underestimated Marcus. They had dismissed him, thinking he was just another worker, just another person who didn't fit in their world of luxury. But now, they were learning a hard lesson. Marcus wasn't just a regular person. He was someone who had built an empire, someone who understood the value of hard work, persistence, and vision. He wasn't interested in the superficial world they operated in, where appearance mattered more than substance. As the manager apologized once again, Marcus's gaze shifted to the other customers in the store, who were now watching the scene unfold. He could see the looks on their faces. Some were shocked, others embarrassed by what had just happened. Marcus didn't care about the spectacle. What mattered now was the lesson they were all learning. Let this be a reminder. Marcus said, his voice quiet but strong. You can't judge a person based on their clothes or their appearance. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. I didn't come here to shop. I came here to show you how quickly you can make someone feel small, and now you've learned what happens when you make that mistake. The manager nodded slowly, the weight of Marcus's words sinking in. He knew he had made a huge error in judgment, and it was something that couldn't be undone. But he also knew that he had to change. His business had to change. They couldn't keep treating people this way and expect to stay successful. Marcus turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silent store. As he walked past the staff, no one dared to speak. No one dared to stop him. They all stood there, reflecting on their actions and the consequences of their behavior. As Marcus reached the door, he paused and glanced back one last time. Remember this moment, he said. It's not about the clothes you wear or the wealth you have. It's about how you treat people. Always. And with that, he stepped out of the store, leaving a stunned silence behind him. The manager and the staff were left to ponder his words, realizing that they had just witnessed something that would change the way they viewed not just customers but people in general. They had underestimated him because of his appearance, but Marcus had shown them the power of respect, the importance of seeing beyond the surface. The day after Marcus Carter's unexpected visit to the luxury store, news of the incident began to spread. Word traveled quickly through the retail world, and soon, the story was the talk of the town. People couldn't believe that a CEO of such immense power had been treated like a janitor in a store where status was everything. The media picked up the story, and it was featured in news outlets and on social media platforms. Everyone was talking about how a high-end store had failed to recognize one of the most successful businessmen in the world, and worse, had treated him with disrespect because of his appearance. But while the world watched, the store's management had to deal with the fallout. The manager, Mr. Gregory, spent the morning answering phone calls from angry customers, many of whom had been regulars at the store for years. They were shocked and appalled by the way Marcus had been treated, and they were threatening to take their business elsewhere. Some customers even posted about the incident online, calling for a boycott of the store until they took action. The pressure was mounting, and Mr. Gregory knew something had to be done. He couldn't ignore the scandal, especially not when it had the potential to destroy the reputation of the store. He had no choice but to act quickly. Meanwhile, the store staff was shaken. Cindy, who had handed Marcus the janitor's uniform, sat in the break room, replaying the events over and over in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling of shame that had settled in her chest. She had treated Marcus with disdain simply because he didn't look the part, and now she felt the weight of her mistake more than ever. Cindy had always believed in doing things the right way, the way the store's management expected, the way that made her look good in front of the customers. But in that moment, when she had judged Marcus based on his appearance, she had forgotten the most important lesson: respect. She wondered if Marcus knew what kind of impact he had made. She knew she would never forget this lesson. How could she? How could anyone forget what happened when they failed to see a person for who they truly were? Back in his office, Marcus Carter was already moving on from the incident. He wasn't the type to dwell on things for too long, especially when it came to trivial matters like a disrespectful store experience. But he couldn't ignore the fact that his actions had sparked something bigger. He had wanted to make a point, but the effect had rippled far beyond that single moment in the store. What surprised him, however, was the way people had responded. Messages of support came pouring in from all over, both from his colleagues in the business world and from everyday people who had heard the story. They praised him for standing up for what was right, for reminding everyone that respect should never depend on appearance. The outpouring of support only strengthened Marcus's belief that change needed to happen. The world didn't revolve around appearances. It revolved around the values you held, the way you treated others, and the impact you made. He wanted to use the situation as an opportunity to start something bigger, to start a conversation about equality, respect, and how businesses, big and small, could change the way they treated their customers. Marcus had been thinking about the store's future and what they would do to make things right. He could have easily brushed the incident off as an isolated mistake, but he knew the lesson had to be learned the hard way. There had to be a real consequence. The next morning, the luxury store released a public statement acknowledging their mistake. They offered a formal apology to Marcus Carter, the staff involved, and the public. But that wasn't enough for Marcus. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered. A few days later, Marcus sent a message to the store's management team. He wasn't interested in receiving an apology. What he wanted was something that would ensure a mistake like this never happened again. "I'm offering you the opportunity to change," the message read. "You have the chance to make amends, not only to me, but to the countless people who have been treated unfairly by businesses that prioritize status over respect. I want to work with you to establish a company-wide program on customer service and equality. If you truly care about your reputation, you'll take this opportunity seriously." The response from the store came quickly. They agreed to work with Marcus on the program, which would include mandatory training for all staff on customer equality, unconscious bias, and proper treatment of all people, regardless of their status. The luxury store had to face the truth. If they wanted to remain relevant, they had to adapt to a world that was no longer defined by outward appearances. The next time Marcus visited the store, it was under different circumstances. The manager and several staff members greeted him at the door. This time there were no sneers or cold stares. No assumptions about who he was or what he could afford. The staff had learned their lesson. Marcus didn't come to shop. He didn't need anything the store had to offer. He came to see the changes they had promised. He was satisfied with the new approach, but he knew that the real work had just begun. It wasn't about a single visit or a public apology. It was about changing the way people viewed others, making sure no one ever felt invisible again. As he left the store that day, he knew that his actions had created a lasting impact. Not just on the store, but on everyone who had witnessed the incident. Marcus had shown them the power of respect, the importance of seeing people for who they truly were, and how one moment of kindness or disrespect could change everything. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. And for Marcus Carter, it was just the beginning of his journey to make the world a little fairer, one lesson at a time. A week had passed since Marcus Carter's visit to the luxury store, and the ripple effects were still being felt. The store had committed to the changes Marcus suggested, and there were reports of staff attending workshops on customer service and equality. But the impact went beyond just one store. It spread through the business community, sparking a conversation about treating people with dignity and respect, no matter their background or appearance. Marcus received messages from across the globe, not just from other CEOs, but from regular people who had faced similar judgment or mistreatment. Some shared their own stories of discrimination, while others expressed their gratitude to Marcus for standing up for them when they couldn't stand up for themselves. The power of one man's actions had set off a chain reaction. And Marcus knew that the most powerful change started from within, from the core values that businesses and individuals carried with them. But while the world responded to Marcus's actions, there were still those who tried to brush it all off as a simple mistake, an isolated incident that didn't need to be overanalyzed. Some critics questioned whether the store had really learned anything at all, or if it was just a publicity stunt to save face. Marcus wasn't interested in their opinions. He had done what he could to create awareness. It was up to the store, and everyone else, to make sure the change stuck. As for the store, the real test was about to come. A few days after Marcus's visit, the store hosted a private event to unveil their new customer service training program. The event was meant to showcase their commitment to change and to demonstrate how seriously they took the lessons Marcus had taught them. Marcus had been invited to attend, and though he wasn't one to make a big show of things, he knew that his presence would send a strong message. He had no intention of sitting back and waiting for the store to pat itself on the back for doing the bare minimum. No, this event had to be a turning point. The event was held in a sleek, modern showroom inside the store. As Marcus arrived, he was greeted by the store's management team, who looked genuinely eager to impress him. They led him to a small stage where the new program was about to be announced. The room was filled with employees, some of whom Marcus had never seen before, but many of whom he had noticed in the days following the incident. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone in the room knew that this was a make-or-break moment for the store. As the manager stepped onto the stage, he began to speak about the changes they were implementing. He explained how the store had partnered with Marcus to create a program that would train employees on the importance of equality and respect. He shared stories of how the staff had already begun to recognize their own biases and how they were learning to treat customers from all walks of life with the respect they deserved. But then, Marcus stood up. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. "Thank you for the effort," Marcus said, his voice calm but strong. "But let's be clear here, words are easy. What matters is whether or not these changes are going to last. We've seen many companies claim to do better, but the truth is, it's the everyday actions that count. It's not about how you act when the spotlight is on you, it's how you act when no one is watching." The manager nodded, clearly, understanding the weight of Marcus's words. He had heard about Marcus's reputation as a no-nonsense leader. What Marcus said carried weight. But Marcus wasn't finished. "I came here not to see a presentation, but to see action. You've made promises and I'll be watching. The world will be watching. So will your customers. If this is truly the start of a change, you will prove it every single day. I'm not asking for perfection, but for consistency." There was a long pause as the room took in Marcus's words. The silence was thick, but it was the kind of silence that felt important. Everyone in the room understood the stakes. They knew that their actions moving forward would define not just their reputation, but the way they viewed and treated every customer who walked through their doors. The manager cleared his throat and addressed the room. "Marcus is right. This is not just about a program. This is about a shift in mindset. We are committed to making real, lasting change, not just in our store, but in the way we treat people, regardless of who they are. We are ready to do the work." The employees nodded, some of them appearing genuinely moved by the seriousness of the conversation. For many of them, it was an eye-opening moment. They had been part of a system that judged people by their appearance, their clothes, and their status, and now they were being asked to unlearn that mindset and embrace something better. It wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to try. Marcus stepped forward, his gaze scanning the room. "This isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever walked into this store and felt less than, simply because of the way they looked. This is your chance to show the world what you're really made of. I'll be watching, but more importantly, so will everyone else who's been treated unfairly in the past." The manager stepped down from the stage, and the room filled with soft applause. Marcus could see the determination in the staff's eyes, and for the first time, he felt confident that change was possible. The event ended with a sense of cautious optimism. Marcus knew that the road ahead wouldn't be without challenges, but at least now, the store had taken the first step toward doing better. It was up to them to follow through and prove that they had learned their lesson. As Marcus left the store that day, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He hadn't come to fight, he had come to make a difference. And in that moment, he knew that somehow he had. The real test, however, would come in the months ahead. Would the store's new commitment to respect and equality last? Marcus had given them the opportunity. Now it was their turn to prove they could live up to it. Months passed, and the world had not forgotten Marcus Carter's bold move in the luxury store. The once disgruntled staff had now become some of the store's most loyal and conscientious employees. They had truly embraced the changes, and the results were evident. The store's customer service ratings had soared. Customers who had previously felt judged by the staff now found themselves welcomed with open arms. Word of the store's transformation spread, and soon there were lines out the door, not just because of the high-end merchandise, but because people wanted to experience the change in atmosphere, the difference in the way they were treated. Yet, There were still those who doubted whether the shift in culture would last. Some claimed it was just a temporary phase, a response to the media spotlight. But as time went on, it became clear that this was not the case. Marcus, for one, had been keeping a close eye on the store's progress. He had attended several events, meeting with customers and employees alike. He had seen the difference firsthand, how staff now treated every person who walked in as if they were VIPs, regardless of their appearance. The new mindset had taken root, and it was growing stronger with each passing day. But not everyone was happy with the store's new direction. A few of the old guard, those who had been in charge when Marcus first visited, began to voice their concerns. They didn't like the idea of changing the store's long-established ways. They believed it would undermine the brand's exclusivity, that the high-end appeal would be diluted by the shift toward equality and respect. To them, Marcus's influence was a threat to everything they had worked for. One day, Marcus received a phone call from the store's CEO, Sarah Thompson. She had been at the helm of the store since the transformation began and had played a key role in implementing the changes Marcus had pushed for. But now she sounded worried. "Marcus, I need to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice strained. "There's a faction within the company that's pushing back. They don't believe in the changes we've made. They want to return to the old ways of doing things, to focus on exclusivity and high-status customers. They're afraid that our commitment to equality is compromising our brand." Marcus paused for a moment, his thoughts racing. He had known this day might come. There would always be those who resisted change, who wanted to cling to the past. But he wasn't willing to let all their progress be undone. "I understand, Sarah," Marcus replied, his voice calm but firm. "But this is a turning point for your store. It's not just about making a sale. It's about making a statement. The world is watching, and if you backtrack now, you risk losing everything you've worked for. You can't let a few people dictate the future." Sarah sighed. "I know, but these people have influence and they're not backing down. They're trying to convince the board that we've made a mistake." Marcus thought for a moment. "You've built something real, Sarah. People are starting to trust your brand again. They're seeing you for who you are. Not just a luxury store, but a place where everyone is treated with respect. Don't let a handful of people ruin that. Stand strong." The conversation ended, but Marcus knew it was far from over. He had to act fast to make sure the store didn't fall back into its old ways. So, he arranged a meeting with the company's board of directors. The meeting was intense. Marcus walked into the room with confidence, knowing that he had the support of the public and the customers behind him. He addressed the board directly. "You've made incredible progress," Marcus began. "You've shown the world that your store is about more than just wealth and status. It's about valuing people, regardless of their background or appearance. That's a message that resonates with today's society." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The board members were all silent, their eyes fixed on him. "I understand that change is difficult," Marcus continued, "but you've already set the wheels in motion. You can't stop now. If you do, you'll lose everything, your reputation, your customers, your employees. They'll all turn their backs on you. People want authenticity. They want brands that stand for something. Don't let that slip away." The room was still. No one spoke for a long time. But then slowly, one by one, the board members began to nod in agreement. Sarah Thompson, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up. "Marcus is right. We've come too far to go back now. We've made mistakes in the past, but we've learned. We need to stay committed to our values, not just for the sake of our customers, but for the sake of our brand's integrity." The board looked around at each other, and one by one they agreed. They were not going to let a few dissenting voices dictate the future of the store. The decision was made. The store would continue to uphold the values of equality, respect, and dignity for all customers. When Marcus left the meeting, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had done what he came to do. The store had passed the test. The commitment to change was no longer just a promise. It was a reality. And as Marcus walked out into the bright sunlight, he knew that the real victory wasn't about how the store had changed. It was about how they had stayed true to what really mattered. Respect for every person who walked through their doors, no matter who they were. That was the future. That was the legacy. The world had been watching. And now, the wine store had proven it was more than just a brand. It was a symbol of change.